Hey, what's up, Hub? It's Mark. We are back with part 3 of what to do when you don't know what to do. We're talking about Joseph. We're talking about family. So grab your Bible, turn to Genesis chapter 39, and let's dive in. Before we get into the meat of the passage, I wanted to ask you a question. Have you ever had a time when you knew the decision you were making was bad and you didn't know if you had the potential to make the right decision? I can remember one time I found a wallet at a baseball game, and I remember thinking, like, this wallet is no longer the owner of whose ever ID is inside this thing. This wallet's mine. And I can remember talking to my parents, and they were saying, well, like, what do you want to do with it? And I said, well, it's free money. Like, why wouldn't I just take it? They lost it. And I can remember my parents taking the time to say, like, don't you think that person is worried about their wallet? Don't you think they're worried about their credit cards, their driver's license, the money inside, all the important stuff that's inside of a wallet? Back in those days, people used to carry pictures in their wallet, and now we just keep them on our phones. But they said, don't you think it would be better to go ahead and turn the wallet back in? And I remember thinking for the first time, like, oh, this is what it looks like to make the right decision, even when it's really not laid out in front of you. Your brain says, well, it's here, I found it, I should be able to keep it. But your heart says, no, that's not exactly right. Maybe get a little less serious. I've used this illustration before. Let's say you're playing a game of baseball with all of your friends, and it's a sandlot baseball. There's no umpires, it's just a bunch of kids, right?
Long ball quarter. Come on, Nunez.
You're playing catcher, someone is running home from third, and you put the tag on them, but you put the tag on them too late. They are safe, but there's no umpire, so it's your word against theirs. And if you call them out, then maybe your team wins the game. But you know that you just lied to win the game. So do you win? I know there's a lot of ways in which that's being demonstrated as, like, yeah, do whatever you have to do to win. I think of the flopping happening in the NBA.
He goes way over the top.
I would like to chip in $10.
It drives me insane that NBA players, some of my favorite NBA players, will act like they've been assaulted. Like they are the best actors. They deserve Oscars for their acting in their basketball games. And this happens in soccer too, right? The flopping in basketball is upsetting. It's because they're earning their chance to go shoot a couple foul shots when they didn't actually get fouled. And I'm not here to call out NBA players, but what I am here to say is this: when you don't know what to do, or more clearly, when you have an opportunity to make the right decision, what do? We find ourselves in the story of Joseph in Genesis chapter 39. Remember, we left off 2 chapters ago last week, and basically what's happened is you've got Joseph, he's got brothers, he's got his dad who gave him this robe. Jacob loves Joseph more than his other brothers, which is mistake number 1. And then Joseph has these dreams. He essentially tells these dreams to his brothers and says, you're going to bow down to me. And they do what older brothers do. They punish him. And so they put him in a pit. They decide they're going to kill him. They decide they're going to throw him into slavery. So he ends up in slavery to Pharaoh. And then we find ourselves in Genesis chapter 39. He is in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar is like the captain of the guard. We pick up the story in verse 1 of chapter 39. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph. I have that highlighted right here. The amount of times that it says the Lord was with Joseph, I think it matters, right? Joseph is in one of the worst moments of his life leading up to that moment, and the Lord was with him. We talked about that last week. What do you do when you don't know what to do? What do you do when there's nothing you can do? You remember that God is with you. That was the point last week. Today, we see that show up. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. He was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord had caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field, so he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. Because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. It's crazy. Like, so much is going well for Potiphar because of Joseph. As far as God's standards go, God is going to bless Potiphar because of the righteousness of Joseph, because Joseph is loved by God, and so Potiphar is benefiting from that. And Potiphar's put everything in Joseph's hands. So as far as slave, this is pretty bougie slavery. This is like he's in charge of everything. He's essentially being put in authority. But what's interesting is that he is still a slave, and he's not just a slave to Potiphar, he's a slave also to Potiphar's wife. Joseph was handsome in form and in appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, "Lie with me." Let me translate this into 2020 American. "Boy, you look good, ... I'm not going to finish it. You know what she wants to do, right? She is feeling some kind of way about Joseph. And this is going to be a very interesting moment, because what Joseph knows is that it would not be right to lie with this woman. It's funny. This would be awkward in front of students. It's awkward in front of a camera. Like, I don't know exactly how to say it, but I think we all understand what's happening here. So Joseph knows that it would not be right to participate in this activity with Potiphar's wife. It'd be adultery. That's not Joseph's wife. But he's a slave. Isn't he supposed to just do whatever they say? And there's a big difference here between manual labor and like doing what Potiphar's wife is asking him to do. And so there's a lot of people, I just want to pause here and just say this. There's a lot of people who'd be tempted to say, well, I'm going to do this thing. After all, I am their slave. And there's kind of a wink wink moment, you know, with some of these guys, like sometimes being a slave is not all that bad. Let me just tell you, like, God's law never changes. And I know that maybe we're giggling through this whole story and maybe it's funny, but I want to tell you that sometimes there's opportunities that come along and they look like they fell in your lap, like a wallet that you found in the concourse of a baseball game. It's not your wallet. It's not Joseph's wife. He knows that he cannot do this thing with this woman. Have you ever found yourself in that spot where you realize that if you're going to say no to this, it's actually going to be bad for you? Maybe the opportunity is there to cheat on a test, and you can get an A on the grade if you just cheat. And your parents want you to get A's. Your parents want you to get in good colleges, but I can guarantee you no parent wants their kid to cheat. No boss wants their employees to cheat the system. I think what we all know is and we admire people who lead with honesty. It's been researched over and over and proven over and over that the number one quality that we want in our friends is loyalty and honesty. So why is it that we don't live up to that ourselves? For instance, you know that when it's time to be honest with your parents because of something that happened, because of something you did, that you might get in trouble, but it's always better to be honest than to live a lie. We say that in our home. You get in a little bit of trouble for doing something you're not supposed to be doing. You get in a lot of trouble for lying about it. So what does he do? Right, Potiphar's wife is after him. She likes Joseph. She says, "Come lie with me." Verse 8, he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Pause real quick. It's interesting that it's not even talking about sinning against Potiphar. It's not sinning against himself, like he's sinning against God. And that is where you know that Joseph has got the right mindset, because the whole culture can go bad around you, but that doesn't give you the reason to not live up to biblical standards. If you're a Christ follower, let me tell you, this is all about you and God. And so if the law says it's okay to do this, but God's law says it's not, then we live by God's law. We are first and foremost citizens of the kingdom of heaven, and he is our master. He is our Lord. He is our king. There is no master on earth that is more sovereign than him, that is more in charge than him. We don't worship anyone else over him. So why do we give up to these modern rules and modern ways of living? I'm gonna tell you, Joseph doesn't. This is so encouraging to me, because for all of the reasons that you're tempted to live a certain kind of life because it's popular or because it's normal in culture, or maybe because, let me just go ahead and be real, maybe because it is very against our culture to live by biblical laws. We call it hate speech, even if you speak against things that God has spoken against. But here's the deal. You can be afraid of the people here on earth, or you can be afraid of God who controls heaven and hell and earth and everything in between. He is in charge of what happens with our souls. So why would we be afraid of anything that can happen on this earth when the Lord is the one that we worship? So Joseph's got it right. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. Verse 11, but one day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. The prevailing idea is that he may have run out of the house naked or half naked. She grabs his robe, he lets the robe go, and the boy flees. There's a verse in 2 Timothy 2:22 that says, flee youthful lusts. And I love that verse because it's just, it just reminds me that sometimes you don't need to walk, you need to run away from sin. I don't know that there's ever a time you need to walk away from sin, but I'm saying sometimes when you're in the middle of a situation that's not good, you need to run away. And that's exactly what Joseph did. As soon as she saw that he left the garment in her hand, he fled out of the house. She called to the men of her household and said to him, see, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. She's lying, and he did not do that. Again, just because it's written in the Bible doesn't mean it happened. I want you to read with critical eyes here. What she's doing is she's telling a lie about something that Joseph did not do, but Joseph is going to get punished for it. Verse 15, and as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house. Let me go ahead and just kind of recap the last of the chapter here. As soon as the master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, this is the way your servant treated me, his anger was kindled. So he totally believes his wife. There's not a single moment inside of him where he's like, maybe Joseph didn't do that. Or maybe he was just afraid of standing up to his wife. Verse 20, Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Isn't that crazy, right? Put in slavery, rising up in the ranks. Put in prison, rising up in the ranks. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. There it is again. And whatever he did, the Lord made it to succeed. So just don't miss this. I know you're seeing this and I know you're hearing this and you're saying, if I do the right thing, then I might get punished for it. And I just want to say, yes, that is very true. It's very possible. You may not get punished for it. In this case, Joseph did. He's going to get punished multiple times over stuff that he was supposed to do. I want to say it. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Christianity does not mean that you'll never find trouble in this life. In fact, it might mean that you find more. When you're living by God's standards and those standards don't match up with our culture standards, then of course there's going to be recompense for it. There's going to be people who disagree with you. Joseph is a picture of someone who trusted in God and God was with him. So I want to tell you, just like we said last week, God was with him through all of this. Can you imagine the comfort that Joseph had making that decision, knowing it was the right decision to make? That's another thing I want to talk about. This is so important for you to understand. Joseph had pre-made up this decision in his mind. What would happen if someone that wasn't his wife began to tempt him sexually? It was not a question in Joseph's mind. What happens, right? He said no. She comes at him, he says no. She grabs him and he runs. This is not a man who's making a decision in the moment. This is a man, this is maybe a young boy, right? So I don't know exactly how much time has passed, but not long. He's probably still pretty close to 17. This is a 17-year-old boy that is turning down sex from essentially like a high-ranking official's wife. And that is because he knows not that he might get in trouble, not that Potiphar might be upset, but that God would not approve that action. That is something that's reserved for a husband and wife in that relationship. And so Joseph lives by God's standards and still gets punished on earth for it. And I want to tell you, I hate to see that that happens, but it's going to happen. But you will prove who your allegiance is to. You'll prove truly who you worship. This will expose all of your idols. If your idols are comfort and money and power and all of that, then you will abandon God's laws on this planet to live up to the standards of our culture, to rise up in the ranks of your jobs or your colleges, or you'll cheat through this and that to get the grades. If you don't care about God's standards, then you'll cheat to get the grades, right? But if you're living by God's standards, you know that is not what we're supposed to do. We're not just trying to get ours. We're not just trying to get more for ourselves. The goal is to live by God's standards. And so what does it look like to live a life like Joseph? I also want you to understand, like I said last week, that the Lord is with you through all of this. And in this very moment where you may not be tempted to make a bad decision, these are the moments that you start to really hone in on what's important to you, so that when those moments come, you don't step into them. So maybe you're the kind of person that would say, like, you want sexual purity. So what sexual purity looks like in Joseph's life is never putting yourselves in positions where you might fall to sin in that way. So are you in a relationship with someone who is tempting you to take that step, and you don't want to take that step because that's not aligning with God's laws? Then maybe you shouldn't be in that relationship. See, the thing is that you don't want to put yourself in a place where you have to make that decision in the moment, because a lot of times people fall to temptation if they wait until that moment to decide what they're going to do. But if you make your decision way back here before that decision comes forward, and you're thinking with your right mind, I mean, this is no different than deciding not to go to the grocery store hungry. When I go to the grocery store hungry, man, I'm looking at everything. That looks good. That looks, my cart will be twice as full because everything looks good. But if I go with like a right mindset and a full belly, then I'm like, I'm gonna buy some healthy stuff. I'm gonna buy just what we need. I'm not gonna buy more than what's on my list. I'm not gonna buy that because it just sounds good to me right now. When we make our decisions about our values early on, some of those tough decisions and temptations are actually a lot easier to conquer. Not easy. I'm just saying, your decisions have been pre-made because you've set a value. I'm not going to cheat to get a good grade, so I'll never do that. Someone offers me the answers to the test, I don't want them. I'm going to have relationships that have healthy boundaries, so that when I am looking at my husband or my wife on my wedding day, I can say with full confidence that I have saved that part of my life for them. When I get invited to a party, if I get a hint that there's going to be stuff going on there that doesn't line up with my values, I'm not going to go. Does it mean you won't be punished? You might lose friends. You might lose relationships. You might get a slightly worse grade on the test because maybe if you cheated, you would have got 100. But let me tell you, you want to live a life where you don't have to look over your shoulder and wonder if you should have done it a different way. You will always be thankful that you lived the right way. So here's the question of the week. What do you do when you don't know what to do? You do the next right thing. So if you're in a relationship right now that you don't need to be in, what's the next right thing? I think you know. If you're in a pattern of life where you're like, I have to cheat on some test because I don't know if I'm, and my parents get mad when I don't get good grades. What's the next right thing? Pay better attention in class. Start studying more. Start asking for help. If you've been lying about something in your life, maybe you're lying to your parents, maybe you're lying to your friends, the next right thing is to come clean. Is it painful? Of course it is. It's painful to come clean with someone you've been lying to. It's painful to lose a relationship, but your life will be healthier moving forward, and you will be able to stand before God as someone who lives by His standards and not by the world's. What do you do when you don't know what to do? You do the next right thing.